Welcome, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So at this point, I'm going to turn the show over to Bob, and he is going to facilitate discussion about the food web. There you go, Bob.
Great. Thank you all. Well, thank you all for being here. This is such a joy. It really is such an incredible joy. So let's just get a little bit of history so that everyone who may not be as aware of the food web, as some of us are, would know what's happening. So around, Stuart, help me out, 2018 or so, we had Tara Johnson from Food Finance Institute come here and do a couple of boot camps. She did a boot camp for businesses, and then I asked her, have you ever done a boot camp for a town, like an economic boot camp? And she goes, no. I said, well, let's do one. So we invented it on the spot, and we had economic development people, political people. We had producers, little producers, big producers, manufacturers, and I think that was the session that Galen, you attended, and quite a few other people here. And from that, we really started to pull together the food manufacturing and food production cluster that is beginning to really take hold in town here. And so then the pandemic happened. Great flood happened, the pandemic happened, and now about a year ago, well, a little bit more than a year ago, I was supporting one of our folks who was running for the Iowa House, and I pitched him on the idea of how about having a regeneration corridor. We were thinking initially from Des Moines to Fairfield, but that was a bit of a bridge too far, not many towns in between. But I started to think, why not between Ottumwa and Burlington, down to the Missouri border, one row of counties north, and that's a nice little 10-county area, about 100,000 people, big enough so that we could actually test some of these theories of regional development, where there's enough people and also there's people adjacent to us, right? So there's enough people and enough creativity so that we could actually start beginning realistically to think about reestablishing what some theorists call the infrastructure of the middle. Middle size, which was the only infrastructure we had other than railroads, way back when. It was all regional infrastructure. And as society developed and as businesses developed and the big got bigger, and they bought up a lot of the small businesses for a whole bunch of reasons. So we're stuck at this point, only temporarily, within a food system that's based on huge industrial scale production, industrial scale distribution, supply chains that are 10, 15,000 miles long, relatively easy to disrupt by a war or a pandemic. And we're just imagining that there is the possibility, particularly using some of the advanced understandings of how to model with AI and that kind of thing, so that we can build efficiencies into this regional system that then talks to other regional systems. And this is not a new idea. John Eichert has been preaching this, ag-economist, for years. His idea is you have small local areas that interact with each other and they interact with themselves, and together they create a very, very powerful, resilient quilt of assets, not unlike a microgrid, right? You can have a big, highly disruptible plant on the Mississippi producing a lot of electricity, but a couple pounds of explosive in the right place, and you don't have power. But if you have a microgrid, where you have lots of little independent grids, so if one goes out, it doesn't take the whole grid down, that's roughly the idea. So we were talking about it, and then I finally called Tara up, and I said, Tara, I had this idea of creating the Southeast Iowa Food Web to create this regional infrastructure. Am I nuts? And she goes, actually not, because we did the same thing in Wisconsin in 2011. We looked at Denver and Austin, and 30, 40 years ago, we were peer cities. Those cities just grew tremendously. Madison's a great place, but it didn't grow in the same way. What did they do that we didn't do? They discovered that they regionalized economic development. This wasn't focused just on food, but they regionalized economic development. So they came back And they created 6 or 7 economic zones in Wisconsin where within that zone you could do things rationally. Rather than one town trying to beggar the other, trying to outbid and outgive tax breaks and stuff like that to companies to come in, only to have when the goodies are gone, the company goes, see you later, and they go find someone else's money. You could actually cite something like that rationally within a region that makes sense for the whole region. So, and sure, her contention to me in that conversation was that Wisconsin withstood the pandemic in a far, far superior way with that structure than they would have otherwise. So it created the predicted resilience. And so with that, we did our first Ignite meeting in May 10th. Many of you were present. The only meeting in my career where more people showed up than registered. Now that's a really good sign. And that was a consortium. Alex was here, Nubelco was there in force. Academics, producers, what would you say? Probably a third of the people there were in some level of production and or manufacture. So it was really the people there who were actually doing it. And there were a lot of people who are fans of it, myself included. But we all came together and we had a really amazing day. And from that came the relationship with Nubelco. About 2 weeks later, Mike Heaton, who was at Nubelco at that point, called me and said, based on what we saw and heard at the Ignite Day, we're going to shift our priorities and prioritize for the next 2 years the Southeast Iowa Food Web. Now, folks, where did the Southeast Iowa Food Web come from? This is a little pro tip. If you imagine something and you make it up and it makes sense and you start talking about it, guess what? It's real. It becomes real. That's the alchemy of taking thought and turning it into reality. And so 2 weeks later, I had that phone call. He said, and by the way, we've got some SBA grants. We're going for a bigger one. We're going to go for match money. I said, buddy, we are off to the races. And so that's where Traction Tuesdays, but they put a meeting on Tuesdays. So we became automatically Traction Thursdays. But that was one of the elements of the grant. There are other elements of the grant. One of which, and I don't see Kellen on with us, so I'll do my best to channel Kellen Gracie and Ravada Consulting and talk about our needs assessment. But fundamentally, that funding funds our wonderful friend and supporter, Alex, to be our technical support, and Traction Thursdays that eventually is conceived to be in all of the counties, or at least clusters of the counties. So we had some momentum here, so we started here. But we're going to be in Mount Pleasant, aren't we, Sue, very shortly? Yes, we are, definitely. So that's part of it. And then the other big part of it is the needs assessment. Because one of the things that we discovered during that day is that if we're going to create a regional map, Ravi certainly understands this from your background. If you're going to do a regional effort in food or anything, you need to know who the players are and what the relationship between the players actually is. With that, then you can start, that's the beginning of your mosaic, right? Then you can fill in the fish or the dolphin or whatever by putting more mosaic pieces, and pretty soon you've got something that really has some heft. So Kellen Gracie and Ravada Consulting are now actively engaged in creating that needs assessment. Kellen has got some real chops. He was the chief data scientist for GoDaddy's Venture Forward program, a professor of computer science, so really a data guy. So we're going to have some fabulous data out of that. And it's not just going to be quantitative, it's going to be qualitative. There's going to be a quantitative element, and there's going to be a qualitative shoe leather, talking to David, talking to producers, talking to people in the area so that we get even a further sense of what's actually needed, what people are thinking about, what's important to them. What do they get excited about? Perhaps more than anything else, what are they excited about? So that's happening. And so in the process of this, we have, through the Sustainable Living Coalition, been involved. Barb Stone, bless her heart, created... Barb, entrance. I would just, your name just passed my lips. Barb Stone, who just came in, was instrumental in pulling together the food hubs. Those are the aggregators, either food hubs or food hub-like organizations. And they together hired Tara Johnson. I went with Barb to see Tara. We weren't aggregating at the time, but I heard that woman for 1 hour and I said, "You are coming to Fairfield." And she goes, "Of course." And so that's how that started. So through that, I got involved in the Iowa Food Systems Coalition, which the Food Hub Working Group was a key, probably one of the nutritive elements to begin with, plus a lot of other organizations, nonprofit, Practical Farmers of Iowa, our land-grant universities. And the purpose of that organization, as its name implies, is to create a coalition of food systems to create an overarching, resilient food system for Iowa, where we're not as dependent on distance food as we are right now. And so that I somehow ended up being one of the polishers of one of the 9 chapters of an overarching plan called Setting the Table for All Iowans, which is the big plan that's being put together. It's about to be released. And I invited Gil here to be with us. And Gil, I'm going to try to, as soon as I turn it over to you, I'm going to try to highlight you so that you show up big on the screen. But I would say, from my personal standpoint, one of the most fabulous things about that experience is meeting this guy here. You'll see that his background is just phenomenal. And he brings a level of rigor as a rural sociologist that I think is just absolutely crucial, a real key performance indicator for us. So anyway, what we're going to be doing now, and he's going to be talking about the potential of our area being part of a big national effort that he's been involved with for 10 years. It gets dizzying, doesn't it? Like all these details. But all of a sudden, the quilt is being woven. All these different pieces and parts are coming together. And so I felt like it was time, now that we had the needs assessment in the pipeline, and we would have it. The state plan is there, going to be happening. It's time for Ignite 2. And so I haven't heard back from the Fair Board, but we will be doing that, assuming that the room is available, on either June 1 or June 8th. So Barb is wincing. Well, then maybe we'll do it another time, because Barb, you got to be there, Barb. Anyway, we'll figure it out. So that will be another big convocation, and in that we will have the needs assessment done, we'll have the plan done, we'll have more traction with Traction Thursdays here. We'll have some potential very interesting, potentially very large-scale projects that will be, and smaller projects of all kinds. And that will be the time where Tara comes and does another session with us. And I'm going to meet her again at 4 o'clock. And Jeff, Michael can't make it, but if you can make it at 4 o'clock, let's meet with Tara. And let's talk about structuring, because you were there, structuring that meeting. So we'll figure out what that meeting wants to look like, but it's going to be fabulous. And it'll be another big push forward. You know, everyone knows about a flywheel, right? And when you start pushing a flywheel, does it go real fast, really quickly? No, it barely moves. But if you can push on the flywheel, hey, Michael, all right. If you can push on the flywheel and you can get the flywheel to move even a little bit, what do? Complain that it's not moving very much, or celebrate the dickens out of it? You celebrate every little tiny bit of additional momentum. And that way, everyone is enthusiastic to give the thing another push. and then another push. And that's really what we're doing with Traction Thursdays. It's very important for individual entrepreneurs to get the kind of help that Alex can give, and from their peer group. It's absolutely even most crucial that we keep our emotions at a high level and our enthusiasm at a high level. And there's no better way to do that, in my view, than to be together on a regular basis. So anyway, that's a little bit, as I say, in long, that's a little bit of the history of this. So Gil, I'm going to try to highlight you. Let's see here. More spotlight for everyone. Okay, great. So Gil, what I'd like you to do is give a little bit of your background, and then also talk about the CARROT program that we could potentially be involved with, and our work together with the Food Coalition, and all of that washed through your background as a rural sociologist working with farmers markets and smallholders. So Gil, over to you.
Thank you, Bob. I think I certainly concur with Bob, his earlier remarks about, if you project something imaginatively, sometimes it might happen. I fear, though, it may be a bit of a stretch for me to be able to actually measure up to that wonderful introduction that Bob gave me. But I'll work on it here. I come from a rural background. I grew up on a small farm, went to Iowa State with a farm, what was then a farm operation major. After my service in the Army, I worked at a short stint with Extension. I came into sociology and worked on a number of issues. It's particularly with the 1980s farm crisis and stuff, I became more and more concerned about what was happening with agriculture, the rural communities, and the environment. And so I've over the years worked on a bunch of different areas, including farmers markets as rural enterprise incubators, small-scale food processors. I helped found New York State Food Processors Association, and I studied, helped with rural visioning kinds of activities, and I've done a bunch of things. I should have made a list, but anyway. And in retirement, I have been here in Iowa trying to figure out ways that I can contribute. And this Iowa Food System Plan was one of them. So I've been, over the last several years, been working with a group called the License Center for Civic Agriculture. Tom Lyson was a colleague of mine at Cornell, and he died in 2005. And one of his other colleagues has founded the License Center for Civic Agriculture and Food, and so I've been part of that, and with a number of their projects, including the North American Food System network. And this network has come this CARROT project. It's called the Community and Agricultural Resilience Audit Tool, and I think I've been talking with the lead person with NAFSN, and it sounds like we'll be able to implement the CARROT tool. There's a pilot project that we didn't quite make the deadline, but because I've been involved in it, it seems like we can possibly do this in Southeast Iowa, and I'm hoping that will be the case. I don't know what else. The CARROT tool involves seven different themes, and I could go through all those, but it's been a long-term project developing, and we worked a lot trying to figure out broad applicability to adapt to different communities because each community or locality is so different. But anyway, over the process of this, we've come up with this tool, and then there was a wonderful undergraduate work study student at Cornell who came up with an adaptation for the web, and so I think it's ready to go, and I'm looking forward to seeing how. And there are what, 6 or so other pilot projects, and so I think I'm hoping that you will be able to be another one.
If anyone has any questions or observations or thoughts about what I said, or any questions for Gil, please, Alex.
As you think about scaling this out, and where do you find where will the communities begin to see the first signs of this slowly but surely building? You don't all of a sudden implement the entire system all at once. Is it going to be tomato farms, tomato canning? Is it going to be just the local farmer is supplying? Where's the most obvious entry point for this to build from, aside from Traction Thursday? And that's a question for you too, Bob.
Okay. Well, Gil has forgotten more than I'll ever know about this. So over to you, Gil.
Well, the thing is, with the great variability in the resources and the people and their interests in a particular community, I don't really think it's reasonable to expect to have a template you can put down and build up in different communities. So it's going to have to be what we call emergent. I think going to be grounded in what your particular situation is, and it will require the creativity and dedication of the people in the particular locality to pull it off. And that's not kind of the answer that anybody wants, but I don't. If I had all those answers, I wouldn't be sitting here probably.
Thank you, Gil. Yeah.
Just to clarify, isn't the sequence here where, by virtue of that Ignite conference last May here in Fairfield, we started to paint kind of the big picture of sort of a final vision of what an active, thriving, local food enterprise zone would look like. And by virtue of Kellen's assessment work and Gil, your carrot model, the idea here is to start identifying the gaps, like what business, if it were in place, would in turn accelerate and facilitate the next level of development. So really you used the term key performance indicators. What are the key businesses that a Southeast Iowa regional food web needs in order to empower the knock-on or follow-on businesses that build up this foundation, right?
Well, that makes sense. I think you identified the key element of the vision, and then and then assessing what resources one has, and then figuring out the gaps and going from there. And it's something that it's going to require local dedication and creativity to pull it off, I think.
Okay, well, the conversation up to this point for the last 5 minutes or so has been, what are the key things that need to happen in order for a regional system to actually take place, knowing that it's going to be somewhat different? And then Barb mentioned that we're working within our Resilient Action Committee process here in Fairfield, the food security part of it, on some key elements, including education. And I'm sure small farm profitability and lots of key things. And unless you solve for those things, the system breaks down. So tell us a little bit about Carrot and what that whole process has uncovered.
Okay, well, this was built from a Delphi process of so-called experts, and so done by the University of Florida, and it was published in an article in the Journal of Agriculture, Food System, Community Development. But they end up with 101 indicators, and I should have, and I didn't know exactly what I was going to be doing here, but anyway, I don't know. I guess I haven't actually done. I haven't set up an account here, but let's see. Maybe I can download Carrot and kind of give you some idea of maybe what's in it. So it comes with a manual, because if you're going to implement something like that, you need to have some kind of some ideas about how to implement it given the intent of the designers, because if you have somebody who doesn't understand how you're going to do it, it might not work. And there are these, so anyway, we have a scoring system. Let me see if I can, we have these, because there are such different, because there are so many different situations, we have the first thing is does not apply. It's one of the questions is about, regarding seafood or something like that. So most, especially in Fairfield, you're probably not going to have that. Then we have these other four different characteristics here, it doesn't apply to your community right now, or I mean, it isn't being implemented. We're talking about it, and then it's actually have the policy, and then you can have, as you know, you could have a policy, but if you don't implement it, it doesn't going to go anywhere. So that's for each one of these each indicator, there'll be these different categories to answer it. But to give you a bigger picture of it, it's not just one person, but if you have different people from different situations in your locality, say consumers, farmers, small business people, people working with low-income people. If you have all these different people answering these questions, you bring it together and discuss what different people see. That helps to understand and bring consensus in the community about the current situation and the need for what needs to be changed. Now that's maybe a challenge in our very divisive context, but I think we need to be able to approach this from a problem-solving way. And then there are the different themes, and then there's a bunch of resources and definitions to help implement it. But let me just take community self-reliance in food, one of the themes. We've got these different articles here, different ones. 37 is we have policies, practices, or programs that include farmland protection strategies like development rights programs and land trusts, among others. So you say, does it apply? And most cases, the answer would be yes. Do you have these policies? No. And then if you have groups that are pushing to implement them, that's one thing, that's another rating, and so you would score it. And then there's places for notes and information sources that can help bring about this discussion. And you may need other, you may be able to add other kinds of things if you needed them, other things once, but this is the basis for starting that important discussion and coming to consensus about what you have. And then that brings them together, people thinking about how they would actually work together to make it happen.
Gil, that is, given our time, thank you very much for that small level of detail. Because when I gave Kellen this tool, he said, oh yeah, they've done a lot of work, and that it would be very helpful for his more specific mapping of our area. So, Gil, why don't you come back full screen so we can, first of all, thank you. And just one final thought. Is it clear to everyone how this thing takes place? There is no linear, we're going to do this and this and this. In fact, Gil and I worked at washing that out of our chapter because we don't know what's going to happen. but it's kind of like a baby forming, like a blastula, and then one tissue system makes another one appear and makes another, but you can't leap. You can only go to the next tissue system, right? And so what we're doing here is super important because we're creating the blastula. We're creating, the fertilized egg that begins to grow, and then all of a sudden the tissue systems start taking place, and that's how it works. And it's pretty predictable, the human being. It's not so predictable with this, except if we have, what gives predictability is our vision. We don't know the way to get it, but if we are very, very crystal clear, no matter what, it doesn't matter if it's impossible, great, it's impossible, we're going to do it anyway. That level of power in our vision is actually the North Star that makes all the other stuff work because it draws us forward in ways that are too complex to understand, but you can predictably invoke those principles if you know how to play the game. If you know how a complex system develops, then you just play the game. And you do it by setting the outer boundary and just watching the thing develop. So this is actually what we're seeing, isn't it? It's pretty cool, isn't it? It's just very, very cool. All right. Well, so Alex, over to you.
Let's give Gil and Bob a round. And what's really interesting is with the work that Nubo does on a statewide basis, the Director Durham in Des Moines and several people in the agricultural community are watching us as we proceed with hopes that what we do here in Southeast Iowa can be replicated in Northeast Iowa or Southwest Iowa. Yes, sir.
Yeah, there's, as far as I know, the only major metropolitan that's investing real money into these problems right now is New Orleans. It's got like a 20-acre project or a 50-acre project that they're launching. That's with Nick Bernal and Sunrise Farms and a couple of guys like Gabriel Cruz. So there's at least one large municipal effort to try and start, because this is all very conceptual stuff at this point, right? So
right.
to try and start implementing. Have you guys tried to plug in with that group or is there something way to sort of like where you can like piggyback or maybe implement some of their stuff here? I don't know if they're synergistic. This is a rural context, that's an urban context.
Bob, Gil, you aware of this group in New Orleans?
There's a big federal project, that's federally funded, but it's a local New Orleans project.
I couldn't hear the question.
He was alluding to a group down in New Orleans with a 20-acre farm or something, 50-acre farm that's doing a little bit of a food hub type of activity. Are you aware of any of that?
I'm not aware of that particular project. There are dozens of those kinds of things around the country, but I'm not aware of that particular one, and I can't claim to be on top of all of the majority of them, even because there are so many of them.
Well, so noted, and there are people in the room that bear witness to this, and we will track it down. But thanks to that.
These guys are very engaged. They're young, they're hungry, they're nimble.
Terrific.
I think that that reflects the principle Bob was just describing, that one of the values of the Traction Thursday meetings is that these network points show up, and it builds our cross-pollination with other projects.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So this is all sort of germinating around the.
Exactly. Well, thank you for that input. While we are getting community input, are there any community announcements? And we'll start remotely with our folks in Mount Pleasant.
There you go. Now I'm unmuted. Like I said, we are preparing for a pitch competition, and I mentioned it earlier, probably too soon. And we are looking for sponsorships. So I am going to be reaching out to the different communities and getting our sponsorship levels to everybody. So be prepared and look out for it. So.
Okay, that sounds good. Any community announcements here in Fairfield?
You got a question for Bob?
All right.
Does Southeast Iowa Food Hub have a website? Is there a plan for one? I'm interested in having like a directory of local farmers and producers who have, so if I've got something to sell, like maybe I'm producing chicken feed, other farmers can find out.
Barb, what do you say to that?
Well, our website really ancient, and it needs upgrading, and that's been one of the key features that I was wanting to put on it. So let's connect around that. And as we identify our other farm partners in this 10-county region, they should be in that directory. Yeah.
Next week, Kelly Prickett's going to be here in her SBDC role and also the accelerator that she's running. And boy, there are some cool companies there. One is a breakfast mix company. I looked up the gal who's running it. Holy mackerel. She was like the breakfast developer for a very, very, very large, very, very well-known restaurant chain. And really very interesting. So she is going to come with all of the resources that she has available. And so that talk will actually be something we can refer back to. So if anyone, I know, Ryan Akira, you're working with her, other people are working with her, have had conversations with her. That entity, along with Nubico, those are a couple of our superpowers. Those are a couple of things that are really going to help us drive this. We come up with the innovation, then they provide a lot of the technical support through Alex, through other resources, including Kiva, Iowa, which we're not going to hear from next week, but we will give them an entire session. So tell your friends to come next week.
All right, everybody, thank you again very much. Have a happy Traction Thursday.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.